So thank you for joining us today for the Art of Matagi Sorensen. I'm Maggie Onosorg, I'm the Public Programs Manager here at the Ameren Museum. Before we begin our program, I would like to acknowledge that the Ameren is located in southern Arizona on lands where the Otham, Hopi, Oshwe, Yoemi, and Apache families have lived for untold generations, and whose wisdom and traditions live on today in vibrant communities. We are grateful for what all of these communities rich in history have to teach us. We would also like to thank all our members and donors who enable the Ameren to provide this free online programming and fulfill Ameren's mission to foster and promote the knowledge and understanding of the Native peoples of the Americas through research, education, conservation, and community engagement. To learn how you can assist the Ameren in supporting its mission and programming by becoming a member or donor, please visit ameren.org. Please also join us on Saturday, August 12th for Dr. Marilyn Poole, who will be speaking on the distribution of cultural lac scale use in the arid Southwest. And on Saturday, September 30th, Dr. Giselle Ramon Sabarian, who is Tohono O'odham from the San Javier District, will be speaking on caretakers of the land, history and water in the San Javier community. To register or for more information about these and other programs, please go to our events page on our website, ameren.org. If you'd like to ask any questions today, please type your questions in the Q&A chat box, and I will gather those for Matagi after his presentation. Also, a link to the recording of today's program will be sent to all our registrants and will be available to watch on our YouTube channel. So today we are very pleased to have Matagi Sorensen here with us today to talk about and share his work. A little bit of background. Matagi was born in Cottonwood, Arizona. He's of Yavapai and Apache heritage. He had an interesting childhood traveling around the Southwest with his family, making small craft items to sell. He remained interested in art throughout, and his family moved back to the reservation when he was 15. And at 18, he went to work for his tribe, traveling and giving talks on socioeconomic situations within his community. He enrolled at Yavapai Community College when he was 24. He had remained interested in art and eventually took a jewelry making class. His admiration and love for the art form led him to want to become a professional jeweler and learn as much as he could. He graduated with a BFA from Northern Arizona University with an emphasis on metalsmithing in 2011. He went on to get his MFA at Arizona State University in 2021, where he furthered his knowledge and skills in metalsmithing and design. His work has been shown around the country in many prestigious art shows, and he is well on his way to becoming an exciting contributor to the art form. So please welcome Matagi Sorensen.
Thank you, Maggie. Hi, everyone. So I think that gives a lot of background on me. So I kind of want to say a lot of my art, and I think it really shows in the jewelry pieces. To me, they're wearable sculptures, and they're often based on experiences I've had. Experiences like gathering plants in the wild, and in my homelands where I'm from, Central Arizona, Camp Verde, Yavapai-Apache Reservation, Camp Verde. It kind of sits in a bowl, and it's one of the few really green areas, I think. So there's some diversity in plant life, and that's always been really exciting to me. When I was growing up, we had the privilege to live outside for a long time, off and on for a couple of years, where I really got to engage a lot with the natural environment, and it was tough. It was definitely a hard living, but I think that type of hard living also really forces you to really analyze your surroundings and see what you can do with that to make a living. And that's what my family did. We would find rocks in the washes, and it had to be a perfect size rock to be able to turn into something, and or finding acorns and paint them to look like barrel cactuses, or just anything really. Finding the fishhook mesquites, the thorns on them, and using those as like to go along with these carvings I would make that look like snakes from cottonwood roots, and using those as the teeth for the snake things. So it was all of that type of stuff. And it took me until probably grad school to really understand how that changed the way I look at, my work so much, of how even today it's hard for me not to go to a place and get excited by some new scenery and thinking about that plant life or those particular washes and how that would be such a beautiful jewelry design, or just maybe understanding how those systems work, like how drainage off, mountains work, and why trees twist a certain way they do, and, so forth. So anyway, so that's kind of that's where my art comes from. It comes from a lot of plant life, and and a lot of my experience with it and how I've worked with it. And I think that that's not unique to just myself. I feel like that's something that's gone on here for centuries, of using plant life in artwork and telling the stories in a different way. So I want to go ahead and share my screen now and show you some of my work. So let me go ahead and do this. Okay. So this first image is my great grandmother, person who inspired me a lot of my work. Maggie, can you see everything fine on the shared screen?
Yeah, if you can move that little Amarin box over a little, that'd be good on the top.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Go. So I took a picture of some of the devil's claws that I use, and the devil's claws is for those of you who don't know, it's the black part in the baskets. I've always found them to be such a fascinating plant, right from how they carry their seeds, what the hooks do, but also because of just how strong they are. And we've used them a lot in my family, and my great grandmother there is using them in her basket weaving, and it's the black part in the basket. So you'll see it there. So I grew up around these, and I love this plant so much. It just the way it looks, the character it has. I've always thought of each seed pod as kind of like an individual person, because they just have so much character to them. And so for the last few decades, I've tried to find ways to incorporate it into my jewelry, even before I did jewelry, of just trying to find some way to make art out of these that wasn't your traditional baskets. And it wasn't until I started grad school at ASU that I really started experimenting with different ways of casting them. And then realizing it's not really about just trying to mimic the piece or mimic the plant. It's about trying to mimic its behavior. And so a lot of the work I do isn't about trying to just cast a plant or capture it exactly as it is, but capture what made it the way it is. And so with these, what's exciting about them is that when they're green and they latch on to different things, that shapes them. And, that shape is what gives a character. The fact that they hook onto an animal and they're dragged, and that's how they spread their seed, and so all of that's kind of what this plant does. And I think that kind of took me into this other area of, like, in the Southwest where I'm from, everything's very rugged. And these plants have thorns, the animals have claws, the javelina have tusks that they dig with. Everything has a way of, like, working in this very rugged climate. And analyzing that really changed the way that I looked at my art and how I do it. And so I want to share with you some of those pieces. So this is the first one here. This one here is there's these deep washes in northern Arizona. There's these really small channels, maybe 5 foot wide, but maybe 10 feet deep. And the roots grow out of the side of the washes. And so this is what that piece is about. It's about those roots that grow out of them. And I have really fond memories of walking down these and looking for plants and looking for stones and trying to find things that we could turn into a craft project and sell. And since that was my whole life when, I was growing up, is not going to school, but, finding pieces of material that could be turned into art and resold. And that's how we made our living. So those memories are just really strong. And so with this one, the turquoise represents all of the little stones that would get caught in that as the water would flood down the washes. And these stones would get caught up in the roots, and those stones would be so perfectly polished, just from those years of being caught in this one spot and just being slowly worked. And so that's what this piece is about. I've done quite a few of these. I've done some really large ones on bronze where I've done sand casting. This one here is a silver one. And so it was too big to cast. It's about 12 inches, I think. So what I did is I cut it into 8 sections and cast them separately, and then put it back together, and then use the stones in there as kind of anchoring points to, give it some steadiness too. So it's a really beautiful piece. It won a Judge's Choice Award at the Heard Museum in 2021 or 2022. So that's the story behind that style. When I do that, that's kind of what it's about, is kind of capturing that time period. This one here is where I first started out, moving away from the devil's claws as trying to cast the thorns itself, but trying to figure out different ways to work it. So these are 2 rings, and I really wish I had some photographs of models wearing it. I just don't. But they fit on the hand. They come up about 5 inches, 4 to 5 inches off the hand. The one on the left side is actually part of the Arizona State Museum collection. So if anybody's in that area, they can go check that out. Using the actual plant material with the silver and treating the plant like something I could inlay really excited me a lot. And it's something I will keep pursuing, but it's very specific. And it's for, I think, just a certain type of, setting. And so it has its limits. Let me go ahead and show you the next one here. So this was an experiment I was doing with, based on that same thing. I wanted to work with the devil's claw, but I needed something that was a little softer. And at that same time, I was going through this phase of, and I still am, of making the longest earring I can make. And these are 8.5 inches, and they're very lightweight. So they're hollow forms. I hammered the center of them and slowly folded them up and twisted them, started together. And then it was just hours of sitting there and hand filing and hand sanding it, because it's so thin, I couldn't use a machine on there without being worried about putting a hole in it. But if I made it any thicker, it would weigh too much for somebody to wear. And so it was this thing I really love about jewelry, where there's a problem and you have to find a way to solve it. And that's probably one of the most exciting things about this craft, is solving problems or building tools to solve a problem. And so a lot of this stuff like this here, for instance, I built a forge to hammer out pieces of steel, tapered steel, so I could fold these forms better. And, it's just, there's a lot of little processes to that, of going from like building a forge to making a hammer that I can use, to making the steel piece that I can use, to finally getting to the point where I get to the earring itself and I can make it as successful. And that's what I really love about it, is that whole process of making all the tools, making all the forms, and being very specific and very, I'd say very determined to find that one thing you're trying to find. And it's what keeps the craft going for me.
Hey, Matagi, can you move that little tap and hold laser pointers thing?
Sure, I didn't realize you could see that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so this is a little smaller version of it. These are 4 inches, and it's a very similar idea. It's also based off the devil's claw, and it was the same idea, where I wanted to do something silver that didn't have the same hooks, but had the same style. And so what I was looking for on these is, when I'm shaping it, is what would this be like if it was a natural environment? If it was growing, how would it grow? And that's kind of what I'm going for on these, is trying to find that. And right now I'm really looking into what I can make for India market, which is, just around the corner. I have a booth at market this year, and there's usually a big juried show. And so I'm kind of experimenting around with like, what can I do in this framework of this style of work to enter into that, jury competition. So these are kind of a process of building that out. These here are two hollowed forms, and one is a bangle on the left side, and it drapes down the hand, goes between the two fingers just slightly. And so what I was looking for with that one is to give us a kind of clause to give us what we don't have, like I was mentioning earlier, how the plants and the animals in the Southwest have these kind of protections, they have thorns or they have claws, and people, we don't have that. And so what we do instead is we make tools to deal with the environment. And so this is my way of making jewelry tools in a sense, or something that we can wear that is a tool. It's not terribly practical, but that's the concept it's coming from. And so the one on the right, the ring, that one folds back around your hand, and it's a lot of work on these, I would say, to like make them to make them feel sharp and dangerous without actually being sharp and dangerous. And that's really the goal with these, is to make it comfortable for the wearer, to make it so they can wear it, but it has the illusion of being something different. It has the illusion of being like a thorn plant or being like a claw that we can put onto our hand. It has that kind of tool aspect of it. And I go a little further down that road in some other pieces too. So these two here, the one on the left, there's a similar one to that one that's in the Arizona State Museum too. And that one's about the century plants. Where I'm from, the Verde Valley, the century plants grow really big, and they have these nice, healthy black thorns on them in the summertime. When, I was young, like, 12, like 14, when we lived outside, I'd wake up in the morning and walk all around and, look at material. And I loved the way the water glistened on these plants from the dew. It looked like little diamonds glistening on them. And so I never forgot that. And about couple of years ago, I started making these. I originally started out doing it a little bit differently, but as I've, honed my style and my skills increased, I started really honing it down to like what I want it to look like. And this is kind of like the last iteration of that, where I made a little stamp to give it those grooves, to give the texture that a thorn would have. And then I put on this particular one, there's 17 diamonds in there, and those represents the water and how the water will glisten on these in the early morning hours. The one on the left is similar ideas about like cactus thorns, but that one's more of an experimental thing where I really was fascinated with how to combine metals. And so that particular piece is 22 layers of copper silver folded together. And it was one of the more bold pieces I did. Often I'll do around 18 or 16 layers, but 22 really changed it for me. I didn't really rethink how I was doing it. And there was a lot more just a lot more work in it. And so I really love that one. So on that one, I wanted the best, cleanest photograph I could get, so you can really see the kind of crispness in that, and just how that material works. And the interesting thing about that is the copper is always oxidizing and the silver isn't. And so the copper is a little bit recessed behind the silver because I over oxidized it. I left in some acid longer so I could get some depth to it. And so that was part of what I was trying to work with too on that one. These here are interesting. The one on the left is a marble from Italy. And I was in this phase of working on a black marble, and a person had given me a chunk of white marble from Italy, and they were a stone sculptor, and they wanted some wedding rings made with it. And so this was part of that chunk of stone. And it's something I want to experiment with more. It's, once again, I think everybody can tell it's kind of based on a devil's claw, but it's a really pared down version of it where I don't think it has that same feeling of danger element to it. but it's also a really sweet design, and it's kind of a clean simplicity to it, which I love. The whole process of making hollow spiculums is something that I've always really enjoyed doing. You know, it's tedious, it's hard to like hide your seams, it's hard to bend it without breaking it. It's tricky to get the right, you know, weight on it, but those are the things that make it really fun. And then on the other side is I was going through a phase where I was driving down to Tucson a lot in grad school, and I was collecting fishhook barrel cactuses, like at the very bottom of the barrel cactus, and I could only find it in Tucson where they're nice thick fishhook thorns. And I took them to my studio, just the dead ones, of course, but I pick live ones. And I took them to my studio and tried to find a way to use that actual material, which I'm still working with because it's just so thick and hardy. But I couldn't come up with anything great. And so I did these silver earrings that's kind of like an homage to it. And because I just thought it was so beautiful to see such a long thorn. These are about 4.5 inches, and those are based on the actual cactus. So that's how those came about. This necklace here, this is a scarf I made. And so I weave my own chains, and for years, I didn't really know what to do with it. I just really enjoyed weaving it. I would love just sitting in a park somewhere, or sitting in even an airport or a show or wherever, and just weaving a chain. And last year, right before my thesis show, I graduated, or I did my show April 1st. So about 2 days before it, I had all these chains I've been weaving and all of these long spiculum thorns, and I didn't know what to do with them. But I knew I needed to do something. And so right before my show, the night before, about 2 days before, I started kind of playing with it. And the night before, I finally got all together. And I did a series of scarves. And I love the way the chains looked with these thorns wrapped around, or these, you know, big hooks wrapped around it. So I did those. I took it a little bit further and made this one here, which is just one continuous piece. And this one was in the Cherokee Market Show last October, and it won the first of its class, and then an innovation award too. So it was probably the biggest award I won up to date, and it's really exciting. So I'll definitely be doing more of these. But the story back behind it is that I wanted something that felt like somewhere between clothing and jewelry, and still played with the idea of thorns, still played with the idea of like giving us some type of protection. And this was kind of my answer to that, is to make this scarf that wraps around your neck. And the thorns kind of represent like a thorn bush, something that we can put on. And I think there's a lot more iterations of this to come, but this is kind of it. This is a ring I was working on. This is 4 inches by about 4 1/4. It's a pretty good size ring. There's an upside down peridot in there that I've been experimenting with setting stones upside down lately, because I felt like the reflection was really good. So if I set the stone flat, the reflection wasn't there. And so I wanted something where it had its really high point. And so I searched for a peridot that just was really deep, had, you know, like a high point to it. And so that's what I put in this to give it that reflection. The rest of it, the black part is forged. It's pieces I forged and soldered together. And the center part was from me clipping the ends of devil's claws and then molding them, and then taking those molds and assembling them, cutting them apart and assembling them back together. And I think there's something really interesting about doing that, about taking raw material, molding it, and reassembling it in ways that wouldn't normally grow. And that was the exciting part for me. I don't know if I'll do another one of these, but I'll probably do some type of iteration of it in some point. But it was a really exciting piece to do. And it was something that I felt like I had a lot of freedom to do anything I wanted to do with it, you know. And that's kind of one of the wonderful things about rings sometimes, is you can just go really big and make it really crazy. And, you know, as long as it fits on a finger, it's fine. And So there's a lot of freedom with working with rings. And so with this one, I had a lot of freedom just to kind of play around with however I wanted to do it. But I'd say it probably took maybe 2 years on this from start to finish. This is based on mesquite leaves and just going out there and collecting leaves and seeing different ways I can work with it. So the ones on the left are oxidized silver, and our right is a high polished copper. And so on the right one, I'm really excited about doing this style. And copper, I think, is often this overlooked, beautiful metal. Yeah, it has so much life to it. And what I try to do with it is I'll do really high polish, and I'll heat it slowly, just very slowly, with one sheet of copper and a torch underneath the piece I'm actually working on, so that the temperature will be even all the way through. And when the metal turns purple, I'll pull it off and I'll let it cool slowly, and then I'll polish it. And I'll do that maybe a couple dozen times until it gets this bright red finish. So the red finish is actually the copper oxidizing. And when you polish oxidization, it turns this bright lipsticky cherry red. And that's the part I get really excited by. So it's something about the way the copper works. It works in this way of using its oxidization as like a tool versus as something that normally, you know, is a huge problem with copper jewelry, where it oxidizes too much, it turns your skin green and so forth. So this one, I really wanted to take that element that I normally wouldn't be able to work with at all and turn that into something. On the left side is Mokame Ghana earrings, and these are kind of just based on some fans I've seen, and the pom pom fans, and we had a bunch of those in Phoenix. I feel like I'm still in the process of trying to figure out how to capture that all the way, because these somewhat they have the general shape, but it's not quite there. The ones on the right are diamonds, gold, and silver. And this is some of my favorite pieces. These are they're 2 inches wide bracelets. And this is, I don't know how many people are familiar with Sedona. Sedona is where my people come from. And so our creation is based out of that area, and our reservation's right next to it. So Sedona has a very special significance to us. And so I spent a lot of time there, you know, as a younger adult. And unfortunately, I don't go there anymore because it's what it's, you know, become. And but I still think the mountains are really beautiful, and we have a lot of stories wrapped around all those mountains. But what I loved about it is I loved about how they layer on top of each other, how that type of sandstone is just constantly layering and being reshaped by all the water that cascade off those rocks. And it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And so that's what these pieces are about. They're about that layering. And it's kind of the reason there's a texture, a heavy, heavy texture in there too, is I really wanted to capture that idea of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Capture the idea of like just that sandy feel to it. So these particular ones are like that, but I think with a lot of my work, often the styles really can kind of interweave with other things. And so there's other pieces I've done that look very similar to this, but have an entirely different story behind them. And those are more about like baskets and so forth. And so it's interesting how like those things overlap a lot. This one here, this I made as right after my thesis show. Is something I wanted to put in my thesis show, and it didn't get done. And so what I was working with a lot during that time is taking files and repurposing them. So I was buying old files and melting, or not melting them, but taking the temper out of it and then putting the temper back in and reshaping them. And so on this one, I took the temper out of it, cut it, put the temper back into it, and inlaid it as if it was a piece of stone into this ring. And so this one fits on the middle finger. And originally I had it sharpened on the top. And this is the reason I used a file. So because it was tool steel, so I could sharpen it and I could use it to cut stuff. And so it sits on the finger, and it was used to cut plants and, you know, really anything. Since then, I've, you know, taken that edge out because it's a little dangerous to wear, you know, but that was the theory behind it. And it was based on when I went to Alaska, I seen the I think it's the blue knives there. I might be saying that wrong, but I seen some knives that were shaped like this, and I just thought it was a really interesting shape and had a lot of function to it. And so when I was thinking about what type of cutting utensil we could wear on our hand that would actually be useful, that's the shape I went with. So this one here is just an experiment in some long rings I was working on, and it was a prelude to the other one I just showed you. I do this shape, this styling quite a bit in my work, where it has these line works in it. And initially it started off where I was really looking at like city grids and designing on that. But since then it's kind of taken a different zone to it. And really what I'm looking at is I'm looking at like kind of like how a line painting would be. You know, it's like I'm cutting these lines with a saw. As I'm doing it, I'm just kind of freehanding it and seeing like where the next line should go and seeing if it looks even, or, you know, almost treating it as kind of like a surface that I'm building a little bit of a painting on. And that kind of excites me. That keeps it interesting for me. And so that's this one here covers the entire hand from, or at least the 4 fingers on top of the hand. So this is some bracelets I did that went with the necklace, and it's very similar style as far as the root structures and how I'm looking at that. These particular ones, I was looking at these like dried up roots and just kind of how their shapes were, and it was really interesting to me, and so that's kind of where I did that. I did such a concave on that, is it was trying to capture that how the edges, you know, will often dry faster and will bend differently than the center. And so that's what was interesting to me, is like how that works. And so, and these are just some very simple designs I was working with to just to really, like, I guess, clear my headspace out and to do something that was really clean. And yeah, I get a lot of pleasure out doing these. You know, it's a lot of hammering work. They're ingot poured, and I'll hammer them out and shape them, and I'll sit there with a file for hours and just kind of really get the lines tight and get the surface, you know, just file finished, which is a lot different than machine finish. It's a much like cleaner surface then. And it's something I don't get to do very often when I'm working in those like hollow forms, or I'm working on these pieces with the holes a lot. And so these are almost a little meditative to me, because it's something that I really enjoy, and it really is about like the tooling and about holding the material in my hand and working it, and it just feels really good. I think that's really it. It's just tactily, mentally, it feels really good to make these. And so I love making them. So I won't do them often, but occasionally I'll do one. And I think that's the end of the show there. So I don't know what time we're at. Maggie, where are we at?
We're at 11:34.
Okay.
So if you can tell me kind of what's next for you, is there anything you're looking forward to learning or making, or?
So yeah, definitely. What's next for me is this piece right here. And this one, the Autry Museum, I pitched this one to take it to the Autry Museum, something similar to this, more of a bronze version of this. And I want to come off the shoulders a little bit more. And I'm really looking at trying to get into more museums like that. But anyway, I should say it's an Indigenous feature show. And I don't know if they'll accept the piece or not. That's not really for me to say yet, but it was a piece I'm trying to pitch for. It's something very similar to this, probably bronze form and a little wider. I wanted to make something that felt like you could step into it. And that's what I'm working on, some very large pieces like this, and then some much smaller versions of this too. So I feel like I have a long ways to go with this design still. What I'm currently looking at is like, how do I make it feel more like a garment and something not so stiff? You know, this piece here is great, but it needs to have just the right neck. And when it fits on that neck, it's perfect. But I'd like something that feels a little more fluid to me. And so that's the process I'm working through. I did a residency at IIA at the beginning of this year and was able to use some of their facilities, and it gave me a lot of ideas. And so I hope to kind of get back over there in the fall when their foundry is back open and try to cast some very large versions of this. The other process I'm doing right now is working on more of these here. And right now I have about 9 chains made, and I'd like to do maybe a few more and find a way that I can drape this more off the shoulders. And, I really want to just toy with that a lot more. And so I think that to answer your question, what I'm looking at is just certain pieces I want to make, and I would love to be more in a fashion world and a museum world. I love selling the work, and that's great, but I would really love to be able to see it on display somewhere, and or to see models walking with it down a runway. And so that's kind of where my head is at right now. And
Gotcha.
yeah.
So being in Santa Fe around all the other jewelers and artists and native cultures, have you found your work changing at all, or who are some of the artists that you look up to?
There's a lot of great artists here. Yeah, there's definitely some changes I've done, but to be honest, I moved here last June, and the elevation really got to me. And so I felt like for most of the summer, I was just like, constantly sick. And so I didn't hardly anything. And coming here from Phoenix too was, a big difference. So in the winter time, like in October, when it got down to like 10 degrees, like I kind of shut down. And so I just say I feel like I've been hibernating a lot since I've been here, and just kind of getting used to the space. And now it's summer again. I'm really excited. And I've been able to start going out and seeing exhibits and seeing other artists, and like that's fun. So I feel like there's going to be a lot that comes out of that. But this last year, I felt like it was just a lot of hibernation for me. I think the other thing that I really felt a lot this last year is just kind of the fallout from being in grad school, and having to build, for 4 years for, a giant show, and, doing that one-man show. So I was pretty gentle with myself this year and giving myself that time to kind of recover from that, because that took a lot out of me doing that. And I'm still kind of processing through about how I feel about all of it. I think it's extremely important for an artist like myself to be in a program and to do grad school and to learn how to do a show. But it's also very emotionally taxing on the people around you too. And I definitely felt some guilt about that, of, how much time I didn't spend with my family and my daughter and all the other stuff. And, so there's a lot of things I still kind of think about with that, of what that means to be an artist like that, that's working that hard all the time, and how that affects my family. And so trying to find 2 things, this last year is what I've been trying to do, of like, how do I separate those 2 out, or how do I make sure I give time back to all the people that have helped me get here, but also, just be that person, a good person that takes care of your family, and that, that visits relatives when you need to, and, things like that, and not let this world consume you too much, because it can. And that's where I felt like in grad school, that there's one opportunity after the other, and it's something you jump on right then, because when that opportunity will pass. But it's taxing, too. And so for me, I think right now I'm in the stage of really trying to create those boundaries of, letting my art really thrive, not letting anything take over, my life.
Learning to balance everything.
Yeah, exactly. And, a lot of that was COVID too, so I think that, a lot of people are still recovering from that. I know for me, my art thrived during that time period when we're shut down for 2 years and there was no markets happening. My art really took off, and I've been kind of analyzing, why is that the case? Why did I thrive so well why did my creativity thrive so well during that time? And something I still don't have an answer for. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And so who are some of the artists that you admire?
God, there's so many. One artist I admire a lot, and is Pat Pruitt and his brother Chris Pruitt. Both of them I really admire a lot. I admire how they make their tools and all the iterations that go into their work of doing something, just again and again and again and getting it right. And I understand that process, and it's a process that I use a lot of my work. And so I really can hook into that, and I can see oh, that's kind of where I want to go with this. It's a dedication to pieces. It's a dedication to the craft. And I think that's really exciting for me. So I definitely admire that. Some of the artists like Maria Zamora, Robin Waney, like those artists, I really just am infatuated with their style and how beautiful their pieces are. And so when I see it, I'm just like, wow, this is just amazing. Carrie Atumby is another person I really admire that way. And then there's artists who, like Liz Wallace, who when I look at her work and how it's being created, I'm like, that's really interesting. And I can't quite figure it out. And that's really exciting to me, to see something I can't figure out. One artist who's helped me out a lot, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, is Don Souffle. He's in Phoenix, and his work is not at all like mine, but he's a brilliant man. He's really, an amazing person to talk to, a very nice man. And so, all these years, he taught me how to inlay. I'd come to him with just a simple problem, and he'd look at it and be like, okay, well, we can do this, this, and this. You want to do it for me? Just tell me how to do it. Or solve it out, or, taught me how to make certain tools for things. And I think that's really important. It's something that I really appreciated for me. As I've had this career, I started doing this in 2007. And the first several years I was in a college program, and that was great, right? You have a professor there, it's very structured. But when I left that in 2011, I graduated and I started doing these markets, native art markets. A lot of the older artists, and even some of my peers, really were nice and gentle with me, and really helped me out a lot, and showed me a lot of tricks, and just really spent time. And I think that, to me, that was so unique, coming from the college world where you're paying for that, as a class you pay for, and otherwise you don't get it. To coming into this market world, where, around these native artists that are just so open and share so much, and are so excited by their work, and it's very moving. I think that as an artist like myself, I try to stay really humble and realize that the reason I create the way I do is because so many people in my life have helped me get there, from collectors purchasing work to museums collecting work, or to, talks even, but especially other artists and peers. And otherwise this wouldn't happen. And so I'm very thankful for that all the time, that realizing that, I'm the person who's creating, I'm the person who's doing the work, but so many people have helped me along the way to get there. And we're never just self-made people. We're, we have communities behind us who help us. And that's
Right. I think people forget how important mentors are in the art world. Mentors
and family, what your family sacrifices for you is huge too. My family's helped me a lot, through, even if it was just picking up my daughter from school when, I had a show to get to, just little things like that changes everything you do. I remember when I first started out, and I was really, really struggling, I go to a show and I wouldn't have money to get a hotel room, so I'd sleep on a bench somewhere, or something like that, right? So you go into all those processes, and, I was a single parent. So knowing that my family would go drive 100 miles and pick up my daughter if they needed to was just all I needed. Otherwise, I couldn't have done that. You can't go through all that stuff, feel okay, if you're completely alone,
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of your family, are any of them still in the arts?
No, not really. No, I can think of my great grandmother passed years ago, and she was the basket weaver. Nobody else I know really took it up. People do it here and there, but I guess my father, I haven't talked to him for a long time, but he probably still does stuff. I just haven't seen him for a while. And yeah, no, it was that time period I grew up in. The work that we did was for pennies, and we just did a lot of it. And so it was, you make 100 pieces and sell it for 50 cents, so it's just very like trading post kind of, grind, and so much different than this world now. And so for a long time, I didn't want to be an artist. I wanted to be a social worker. And I thought I'd just do some arts on the side for me. And that was the path I was on until I met a professor, and she was a poet, and she was telling me about, you do what you love, and if you love it, that's what, makes it work. It's not about whether it's a starving artist or starving writer or whatever it is. If you love it, that's where, you're going to make your money at, or it's where you make your living at. That becomes a career. And it just changed the way I looked at things. And I'm really glad she had that talk with me, because I just had this idea that in my head, from my experience of growing up, that if you make things for a living, you're always going to be living day to day and never quite make enough for tomorrow. So you got to keep it up. And then when I say that, I mean that very literally, like making something in the morning to pay the rent by that evening, and then start it again the next day, and jumping around from hotel to hotel, doing that. And that was something I think was really traumatic, so for years, it took me a while to get over that, of being like, that's not who I am. That's not something I have to do. And I don't have to live quite that desperately. And so, yeah, I forget how I went on that tangent, but anyway, so it was, I think when it comes to my art, like I definitely look at it in a different way. And I was fortunate enough to really be supported a lot and to keep it thriving.
So where can people see you next? What are some?
So the next show I'll be at is India Market. That's third weekend of August. And from there, I have a few other shows that I applied to. One is at the Smithsonian, which is the first weekend it's in Washington, D.C., the first weekend of December. And Cherokee Market in Oklahoma, which is the weekend before Indigenous Peoples Day, so formerly known as Columbus Day. So there's the next shows I'm signed up for. Right now, I have a website under construction still a little bit, so it doesn't have all the updated photos on there, but that's matagifineart.com. And that's where you can purchase some work or see some of the work, or you can see a list of the shows I'm doing. Mostly how I show my work right now is through Instagram and Facebook. And Instagram really works as like a kind of a narrative to these pieces, and it tells a story about them a little bit, right? And I love that because I can sit at my bench and I can take a photo of the work and I can post it right away, and kind of show the processes of it. And so I'm in this process of trying to feed that into the website, so for people who aren't on socials, they can still see all of that. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Well, that's great. I'm going to put all these links into the email that goes to everybody who registered, so they'll have them available to them to look you up and see more of your stuff. And I'm really looking forward to see where your innovation takes you.
Thank you.
And I wish you all the best, and I'm going to let you sign off.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone.